Hey everybody, Brenton O'Callaghan here, the Head of Customer Experience at Syslinks Andrea, and I'm here with my good friend John Appleby, our Chief Revenue Officer, to talk about the future of SAP operations. This is the first in our series of roundtable events where we're going to cover what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the SAP operations world. So John, thank you so much for joining me.
No problems, welcome Brenton.
Yeah, excellent. So before we get started, you and I had a discussion last week about the origin, at least in the SAP world, of the term DevOps. And you had a very particular view on this because I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding, or at least different definitions of what SAP DevOps actually means.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the wider DevOps environment, what happens is that developers write operations code which automatically do things with systems. You know, really simplistic viewpoint on that. And that doesn't really exist in the SAP view of the world, just simply because most of these operations continue to be done manually, regardless of the definition of the word DevOps. So quite often when you see people talk about SAP DevOps, what they really mean is SAP operations.
Right, and that was kind of my perspective. I was asking, why are we talking about DevOps when we're clearly just talking about SAP operations?
Yeah, and I think DevOps and operations in the context of the SAP market right today are really the same thing.
Okay. Right, let's talk about SAP in the SAP operations space. Are they very far behind? What's your perspective on this?
I mean, first of all, I think if you look at the wider IT market, software falls into one of two categories. So first of all, you've got software as a service and infrastructure as a service. You've got companies like Salesforce, Force.com, Workday, that are providing solutions. There are no operators. So those people are not required. And typically, those companies, not all of them, some of them are hamsters and wheels running around, but typically they've invested in software and people that write software, DevOps, that run those applications, that mean that updates can be streamlined across to customers, that you haven't got people running manual operations 24/7. So that's the first side of the market. And the second side of the market is software like Microsoft Stack, Oracle Stack, which are pretty big environments of well understood software by large volumes of people. You compare that to SAP, which, whilst it is the largest enterprise software in the world, has retained a sort of niche status of a group of people that call themselves basis
Special.
NetWeaver specialists. It's sure special, but the point is that has remained a specialist and pretty well paid skill in the market. And so there just hasn't been this commoditization of DevOps, because SAP is perceived to be special and complicated, that has happened in other markets. It just hasn't happened.
And I think we're still seeing a situation where it requires huge amounts of offshore teams to run your SAP operations throughout the ecosystem. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, I mean, I first talked to Hasso Plattner about this about 5 years ago, I think. And he was amazed back then that we pay 1,000 euros a day for somebody to come in and install a system. And really all that happened in that market in the last 20 years, the installation program for SAP SAP Inst, SAP INST, it's the same program that was used
20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah, no, in 1991, longer than that, when R3 became available. It's really the same piece of software. And so all that's happened in the meantime is that organizations have moved some of that work to lower cost centers, like India, which is obviously where the vast majority of SAP's professionals now sit. But really the only difference has been that they've moved it to what's perceived to be a lower cost base. What's really interesting about those locations is they're also much higher margin for the service providers.
But why has SAP not succumbed to the rest of the industry where everything has become automated, where it has become easier? What's different about SAP?
So I think, first of all, you've got to bear in mind, to a degree, they have. So if you look at all of those acquired companies like SuccessFactors and Ariba, Fieldglass, I mean, they already did that, right? So Lars Dalgaard solved that problem in SuccessFactors 10 years ago. So they've brought in some of that DNA. And then second, if you look at things like the HANA Enterprise Cloud, the HANA Cloud Platform, that are built, SAP Cloud Platform now, that are built in-house, they've applied exactly the same methodologies. So the SAP Cloud Platform does streamline updates out to the customers without really any major input from them, so they don't require operators in the same way. So they have done a bunch of stuff. And of course, equally, pieces of software like SAP S4HANA public cloud edition, that runs exactly the same way. So there are quarterly updates to that piece of software.
Yes.
So they have solved that for the future of the company. The problem is this: the vast majority of customers run SAP R3, Business Suite on HANA, S4 HANA on premises, in a private cloud, or in a hyperscale environment. And it's those environments where there just hasn't been any investment on change.
And isn't this the exact message that we saw coming out of DSAG a few weeks ago in Germany, where they were literally asking SAP, what is the direction for us? Because we are running these legacy systems in these legacy data centers.
Well, and the trouble is you call them legacy systems, and I know you're trying to get a rise there. But
never.
But the reality is, right, that if you just move to S4 HANA in the Amazon cloud today, sorry, these days it's now the Microsoft cloud, that's the popular one, following the 75 million euro deal, a year deal that SAP has just recently closed. So, but if you are running S4 HANA, 1810 is it now, in the public cloud, in the Microsoft cloud, you've got exactly the same problem.
Right. I'm just seeing some questions coming in as we're talking, because there's a question chat. So please do send in your questions if you're watching. If we don't get to your question during the cast, we will of course answer it after the broadcast. The next one is coming in from Seamus. So what changes should they be considering within their organization to adapt to the future of SAP?
So who do you mean by they?
Seamus has obviously got a team of SAP operations professionals within his organization. What should they be considering? What should they be investing in?
Should customers be considering? Right. So, I mean, I think first of all, you just need to work your way up through the stack. And most customers are already thinking about this. I mean, they already thought about virtualization 10 years ago, and they're thinking about public cloud models. You know, I told our CIO 7 years ago, I said, when we moved into the US market, I said, I never want to see a server or an IT person or something sitting under a desk.
Right.
I said, and he said, no, but I think we should put something, in the office. And I said, no. I said, it's not. This isn't going to exist. And I take that same view now, but I take that view for SAP systems as well. If I were a CIO, I would not be considering buying data centers equipment to run a piece of software like SAP. I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, it forced us to think about how do you deploy in a more efficient way. And we still ran Microsoft Exchange on premises for email at that time. We moved to Office 365 pretty early on for email, and there were a couple of glitches of needing to run that in like a European environment, but it was really nothing compared to the pain of somebody having to drive to Chicago or fly to Chicago to go and reset a piece of equipment. It just it just doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
So I think then you need to move your way up through the stack, and I think in particular if you look, IBM made a really smart decision buying Red Hat, and with it Ansible, you can already look to automate things like operating system deployments, cloud deployments, using existing tools. So if anyone isn't already doing that, I'd strongly look to do that. And then my third piece is you need to move up through the full stack into the application stack. So what are the tools, systems, processes you can put into place, which reduce the impact of needing manual operators? Not altogether. Goal is to eliminate repetitive activities that are not value add for a human to perform. There is never enough days in the year and never enough hours in the day of an IT operator. The number of times that you have a meeting with somebody who is in the operations team and they aren't able to attend the meeting because they've got a crisis going on.
Right.
The number of times that happen is just too often. Those people should be deployed thinking, how do we build systems and environments which are inherently self-healing, more stable, so that
intelligent, so that they're telling you when there's about to be a problem?
Sure.
Well, there's actually, on that note, we've got another great question that's come in from Sharon, which is, what is your advice to teams struggling with time/bandwidth to get this right? I and my team are constantly firefighting, and management are okay with this because the lights stay on. How do I get them to see the bigger picture?
So first of all, sooner or later, organizations like Sharon have a moment in time where something happens. equipment stops rolling off the manufacturing line, retail productions and web goes down.
Right.
When some kind of business continuity event happens, then for sure there'll be a change. What I'd recommend to somebody in Sharon's position is take a look at the organizations in your industry and what happened to those when something like that happens. Because the impact of it can be really severe. It can be millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions can be squandered by not having systems that run well. First of all, go to the leadership team and just make that case clear. This is what happens to organizations that don't invest in making things better. So that's step one. And then step number two is just simply to come up with a plan. Say, we're going to carve out this piece of the team to invest in people, process, technologies, that's my thing, to make this better and to improve operations. And specifically focus that on the people that do repetitive activities. These are not lowly qualified and poor quality people, almost in any circumstance. They may be more junior people, but they're definitely not low qualified. I mean, I've seen people with 10 years experience installing the same software that could be done automated with Red Hat Ansible or whatever else. So these are not low quality people. And I would look at what's taking up their time. What are the things that mean that they're not able to also be focused on making things better? Now that first 10% of people, we invest in making things better so that those people can then be reallocated to actually improving operations.
And your people will probably enjoy this a lot more because suddenly they're looking at stuff that is newer, more interesting and less repetitive, less mundane. Yeah,
and I think particularly if you're a managed services provider, but also for enterprise customers, that's a really big issue because you spend all of your time training your best people, often on the job, and then they jump to another job and they take those skills elsewhere. If you haven't codified those in systems and processes, all of that is lost when they walk out the door.
The tribal knowledge problem.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What was the one thing that came out of TechEd over the last couple of months? So we had TechEd Las Vegas last month, we had TechEd Barcelona this month. Was there anything you saw that made you go, aha, that's interesting?
I think for me probably the most interesting thing was that customers went to TechEd to learn about deploying S4HANA. And the ones that I spoke to felt like they left with a better understanding of how to do that in practical terms. I think if we go, two TechEds ago, first of all, there was more of a platform focus to the event, but second, there weren't good answers to those questions.
Right.
We were on S4HANA 1503 or whatever it was, and people were thinking, well, I could get my finance system onto a central finance, but that actually just creates more complexity and more technical debt. And I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to sit and wait. And then they look at the roadmap and they're like, well, I need 1610, 1711.
There was always a reason to wait.
There was a reason to wait, and there weren't good answers to the questions. I don't think there are good answers in every case. So, for instance, I think if you're a GTS customer, and you run GTS within your ERP environment, I think there's still tough questions because SAP simplified the number of solutions, so you can't necessarily get a direct upgrade path. Hasso has talked about that multiple times. He views that as a good thing. This is the way we do it. We do it one thing. I think, unfortunately, for some customers, it's not as simple as that because they now have to do a multi-million-dollar project to get there. But I think those are the exceptions rather than the rules. And I think you go back 2 years ago, every customer was thinking, "Oh my God, this business suite system that I implemented in 2003 is going to be out of support in 2025. I don't have a plan." I feel like the customers I spoke to left TechEd thinking, "Oh yeah, I've got a bit of a plan to do this."
Okay, that's good. What are the most common pain areas you're seeing when you're talking to customers at the moment in the SAP operations space?
I think there are a few. The most common is that even today, reliable operations isn't a given. I talk to customers, and I think I mentioned this a little early on, it's not a given when you're talking to operations people that they're going to be able to come to a meeting.
Right.
Because
there is firefighting, something else comes up.
Exactly. There's something going on.
Right.
And that's sort of surprising in this day and age. I mean, you look at Netflix runs on Amazon. Periodically they have some kind of service level problem, but that sort of self-resolves from a Netflix perspective.
Yep.
I'm sure from an Amazon perspective they've got techs working on it and running around, but they've also got a lot of automation as well. But I don't see that generally in the SAP world. I see two types of customers. One, customers that have really invested in a lot of money in process to ensure, and people, to ensure that the systems are reliable, and they've really got that down pat. And others that have got problems. And that's sort of surprising in this sort of automated world that we claim to live in, where we have vacuum cleaners running around the floors and cars that drive themselves.
The vacuum cleaners around the floors.
Yeah, the cat on a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, but my point is that's sort of slightly surprising, but it's definitely true. A lot of SAP customers have got performance problems or reliability problems, availability problems, and that keeps people that are head of SAP up at night. I remember one CIO, and that particular customer has a buzzer system, and I'm sure it used to be like pages, but it's now their phones have got like a page feature where they get an email from a certain address and it makes a noise.
Yes.
And I saw this guy, and it went off during a meeting, and he physically jumped, and that sort of surprises me, and that's the number one anyway.
Okay, awesome. Final question, and it's come in from Sandeep. If a customer is considering deploying to the cloud, where they're going to be on-premise for quite a while they make the jump, what should they be thinking about from an operations standpoint in that hybrid cloud environment?
Well, so I think first, really that's all customers now.
If they're not there, they're thinking about it.
Yeah, but I mean that seriously, because if you don't have, let's suppose you're like a classic customer, your utilities, you're running on premises, IS Utilities, SAP customer running ERP.
Right.
You're telling me you don't have a Workday or a SuccessFactors or some other
SaaS offering? Absolutely.
SaaS. You're also telling me that somebody in IT didn't buy an AWS account, which they connected back, which is running some analytics with an extractor out to BigQuery.
Yep.
So I don't think that the scenario where you don't have a hybrid cloud exists. And so my advice is to think of those environments as one thing. Don't think about them as different silos, and think about them as connected.
Okay.
So how do I now know when I connect those things together that things are going to run as planned? Because as like simplest of examples, most customers have a bank interface. That bank interface sends in a flat file. That flat file gets picked up by some middleware, SAP process integration, whatever it is. That middleware loads that bank interface into a finance environment that, for example, does a three-way match against credit card receipts.
Yep.
So that bank interface goes down on a Monday. It isn't until Friday that people start trying to reconcile their expenses that somebody actually notices.
Yep.
And so, that was just the simplest of examples.
Absolutely, but it's one everybody can relate to.
I just tried to keep it simple, but you relate that to the things I just said. SuccessFactors. I was using a very large SuccessFactors system, and the middleware replication has stopped working, and we couldn't figure out why. And we raised a ticket with the IT people, and the things look different in two different systems.
Right.
Well, the replication has stopped working a couple of weeks before.
Weeks.
Yeah, because you don't notice until remember, this middleware synchronizes employee facts like date of birth.
Right.
And somebody had changed the date of birth and it hadn't replicated out to a medical provider.
Yep.
So that's another example. Again, you take the analytics example. A lot of times you don't notice when analytics is out of date.
Right.
Until the numbers don't reconcile. And so I would advise about thinking, how do you think about that as one holistic system? So like an organism, where you can view the end-to-end process from at least to understand, is everything running as it ought to be? Because if it isn't, now you're deploying you know, in Seamus's world, as you just said, he can now deploy his operators to fix the problems that happened and actually solve those before the business people notice.
Right.
You know, if there's one, you know, when I talk to CIOs, they hate being woken up at night by the CFO or the CEO saying, what the hell's going on? The systems are not running. But what they don't mind is being able to look at something at 11 p.m. Before they go to bed and say, oh, we've got a problem. I understand we've got a problem. They can shoot an email, they can be proactive, they can make sure people are working on it.
Yes.
But in any case, if there is a system that allows them to know that there is a problem,
then that system should have alerted them in the first place.
People are already working on it.
Exactly. So any final thoughts for the viewers before we close it out?
Yeah, I would just say, if you run an SAP Competence Center, if you've got these sorts of people in your responsibility, get somebody to have a look at the people, the process, the technology that they use to run IT operations. Forget about the cost base, because it's not about where the cost base is. I don't know how many people I've spoken to who said, well, we moved that out to India, but it doesn't matter. It matters.
Right.
It really matters. Take a look at that and have a look at what are the opportunities to reduce repetitive activities. You know, we've still got people that do these daily checks. It's like a dirty word to me.
Right.
People log into, you know, somebody's paid to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and run through a list of things and write a Word document on how the system is operating. This is the most low value...
In 2019.
In 2019. This is the most low value thing that a customer could be paying somebody to do, regardless of whether it's included into a contract, regardless of whether they're paying somebody in Montana to do it. It doesn't matter. This is not the right approach, because like that simple daily check example can be just simply automated. Like, there's absolutely no excuse for it. And now you've not got somebody who's potentially doing 2 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's 720 hours. Even at, you know, offshore rate $18 an hour, it's a lot of money just for a daily check,
which could definitely be automated.
Oh, that's just like the simplest example. And then just take it from there and just do it piece by piece. That'd be my parting thought.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everybody for watching. We do have more questions that have come in, and we will get to them after the roundtable. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.
Thanks, Brenton.